My name is Ashley, and this is Let's Talk Dispatch.
I do. You're gonna do it. Do it really well.
And I believe the world needs more dispatchers.
Around in the mud, blood, and
plus
beer.
years that I'm not working 4th of July. 4th of July
This ain't community policing, right? What about community dispatching?
So on this show, with the help of my guests, we will educate, empower, and support the heroes behind the headset.
All right.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode here on Let's Talk Dispatch with me, Ashley, the Raspy Dispatcher. I am so excited to talk about a lot of things today, but we are starting to put out a lot of interviews and clips from all the dispatchers that I've been traveling around and visiting over this past year. We have been to the San Jose Police Department. We have been to the Pleasanton Police Department. We have been all the way out to Lincoln, Nebraska, and Aurora, Colorado. And when we go out and visit these centers, I get to talk to you, dispatchers, all across the states, hear your stories, hear why you are still showing up to this tough job. And if you want to see the full interviews with these dispatchers, they're going to be posted on our YouTube channel at the Raspy Dispatcher. That is where all of our tools for aspiring dispatchers live. Our podcast videos are posted on our YouTube channel. We have over 5,000 subscribers on there, and it is really where the Raspy Dispatcher kind of started. And so it's awesome for it to come full circle like this and be at a point where we're not only reaching so many people through our podcast, through our social media platforms, but I actually have the privilege of going in to these centers and showing you these faces behind these voices. So if you don't subscribe to our YouTube channel, do so ASAP. Again, the Raspy Dispatcher is all you got to search there. It'll be easy to find us. And if you're interested in wanting us to come out to your center, shoot me a message. I'm kind of building a list of folks who are willing to have me come knock on their door. And we're trying to get to as many as we can. And of course, having our sponsors, we just picked up a new sponsor with Zybex Media. And of course, Prepared is still our sponsor. Having those sponsors really gives us the opportunity to continue to create these resources and go visit these centers. So shout out to our sponsors. Make sure to check them out. Today's episode of Let's Talk Dispatch is proudly sponsored by Prepared. Their mission is to be public safety's most assistive technology. Revolutionizing how we handle emergencies, Prepared is dedicated to saving more lives and making our communities safer. Learn more about how Prepared is transforming emergency response at prepared911.com. Our next sponsor is Zybex Media. Since 2020, Zybex has been creating impactful recruitment films for their customers. Zybex Media offers their expertise, providing a full range of media solutions designed to attract and retain talent for all PSAPs. Visit zybex.com/media to learn more. These partnerships help us continue to spread the message that the world needs more dispatchers. Interested in partnering with us? Head to theraspydispatcher.com. All right, enough of my rambling. Let's tell you a little bit about our guest that we have with us today. We're joined by two retired police officers with over a decade of experience in the first responder field. They are a driving force behind Runestone Ranch, an organization recently awarded 501c3 status that is dedicated to mental health outreach for first responders. Brian and Anthony have experienced trauma on the job and know firsthand the importance of peer support and mental health resources. They are here today to share their personal stories and the critical mission of Runestone Ranch. Let's bring them on now. Hi, Brian. Hi, Anthony.
Good morning, Ashley.
Hey.
How are you?
I am
Or
good.
good
How are you
afternoon.
folks?
Doing
Very
really
good.
well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, no problem. You guys are telling me before this is your first podcast. So happy to have you. Happy to be one of your first, I'm sure, not your last podcast to come on and tell us about this awesome ranch you guys are building and your experience in the field.
So, Anthony, you want to start or you want me to start?
You're the so I'm the co-founder of the organization, and Brian over here is the founder of it. So I'll let him he can speak on that. So go ahead, Brian.
Okay. Hey, everybody. So Runestone Ranch is it's a 102-acre ranch out in the Livermore foothills, and my wife and I, we purchased it probably about little over 10 years ago. And the reason we came out here, I was living in Alameda, working at San Leandro Police, and I had about a 7-minute commute, and from door to door. So I'd get home and I'd be still so wound up that I wasn't shutting off. And I remember laying in bed one night and watching the sheets bounce off my chest because my heart was beating so hard. And so I told my wife, I go, if you want me to live long, we need to get the heck out of here and further away from the department, And at the time, some of the officers were getting followed home, and so I'd get home and not shutting off. I'd be in the backyard with the gun and flashlight two nights a week, at minimum, thinking someone was in my backyard and trying to protect my family. And it's not a good way to live, when you have to do that for 12 hours a day and then you go home and you still experience that. So we ended up out in Livermore, and I was a police officer from 2008 to 2018. In 2015, I experienced 2 very traumatic incidents back to back with only a day apart. I had a captain that Captain Ed Tracy, that was mentoring me to be a sergeant, and he took a lot of interest in me and spent a lot of time with me, and really was trying to develop my skills and trying to get me into the office. And so it turns out he suddenly died of cancer, and the very next day I got into an incident over in Oakland. Some of our San Leandro guys were staking out a burglary suspect from the previous day, and so we went into Oakland, and long story short, there was a gal in a stolen car. She had rammed one of the SWAT sergeants and pinned his legs into his truck, and so he ended up shooting her through the windshield. And she was still, she was shot, and she still had her foot on the gas, and the engine was revving. And I was the only one on the passenger side of the car. So I reached in and, shut the ignition off and put it in neutral. And we pushed the car back. And so I was on the other side of the car, and I didn't have really access from where I was to get to my sergeant that got crushed. He got carried away out of sight. And so I was kind of standing there with this gal that just got shot. And a few months prior to that, I took a tactical medicine course. And through that course, they give you a life-saving kit that we're supposed to use on each other. And my first thought was, gosh, what better opportunity do I have to use this and practice on somebody that just actually got shot? So I pulled her out of the car, and I saw that her chest was swelling up, and she had a gunshot wound into the chest here. And so I recognized that from the class, that the air that she was breathing in wasn't coming out of her mouth. It was filling up her chest cavity. And so in that kit, it came with a little needle, and I was able to, stab her in the chest, patch her wound. And eventually I found out that I had saved her life. So then following that, I went on vacation with my family and ended up having to take 5 weeks off because I had a couple members of my family got ill. My dad had a stroke, and my son had some sort of Kawasaki disease, and we were over in Hawaii when all this happened. So I ended up spending immediately spending 5 weeks in Hawaii right after those 2 incidents at work. And I never got help for them. I finally got back to California, and it was about a month and a half. So it was about 2.5 months away from work. And when I went back to work, I finally decided, okay, I need to go in and get some help for the stuff that happened months ago at work. Now that my family was stabilized and all that. Well, the day that I was driving into work, I got a text message that said that one of the sergeants at the neighboring agencies that we'd often train with was shot in the face on a traffic stop. And so I show up to work hoping to get some help, and everybody's in tears and crying, and I couldn't raise my hand and say, hey, I need something that, I need some help for something that happened months ago, when everybody else was, going through a really depressing and shocking kind of tragic moment. So I just packed it away and kept plugging away. And before I knew it, I was doing things that were kind of reckless on the job. I was reckless in my personal life, and I was drinking a lot, and just really wasn't the person I needed to be for my family or for the department. And I put in for a one-time leave of absence through the department, and it was a written request that circulated the whole police department, and eventually ended up on HR's desk. And the HR gal called me and said, hey, you got several options here. She goes, but the first 2 that we're looking at here, the incidents were work related. She goes, this is likely a workman's comp case. So I filed out a workman's comp case, and then it got denied for mental health, and denied. And so finally I found a psychiatrist at a local city nearby, and for 2 years I went twice a week, and I feel like that really helped me. That, and being in nature out here on the ranch, and there was a lot of different things that kind of came into play to my healing. I had a very supportive wife who wouldn't give up on me, and it was kind of through that process, that 2-year process, that I realized that the systems that we have in place for first responders really fall short of really truly helping us. And we have internal peer supports within the departments, but if you go to those, it's often we want to think it's a confidential thing, but realistically there's locker room talk, and it comes back around, and before you know it, everybody knows your business. And with EAP, you only get 5 visits, and then you got to kind of change the topic of why you're there, and perhaps even start with a whole new counselor through that program too. So it was so kind of fast forward July of 2020. I was living life and kind of got settled in. I was retired out, and being a home dad, a stay-at-home dad, raising 3 boys. And one night I had a vision while I was in the shower. I had never had a vision before in my entire life. And so it was kind of odd what was happening to me, but I had this vision that my wife and I had a retreat on the ranch, and we didn't really know I didn't know what that meant. And immediately after the shower, while I was in the shower, it was like I was being played this movie, and it was very realistic and as if it was happening right now. And so, naturally I go wake my wife up and say, honey, wake up. I was like, we're supposed to open a retreat on the ranch. And it makes me smile because, every time I think about it, her face looking up at me going, what are you talking about? And,
yeah, we'll talk about it in the morning.
yeah. And it was like 2:00 in the morning too. So she thought, she's like, what the heck are you talking about? But I told her, I said, I have no idea, but we're supposed to do something here. So, and that was at the early stages of COVID. and there was a whole social distancing thing, and masks were still really in play. And so we had, a bunch of different police officers that we worked with, and some firefighters from San Leandro. We'd have them come out time to time and just want to get away from people and, connect back to nature. And so we were doing that throughout the summer of 2020. And then, the common message at the end of the day when those folks came out was, gosh, I so needed this. Thank you. And after about 4 or 5 of those, it hit me. I was like, duh, this retreat is supposed to be for us, for us to deal with our trauma. So that's kind of the short and long story of how this all came about. And so for about a year and a half, I knew I couldn't do it on my own because it's a massive project. And so pretty much for about a year and a half, 2 years, I went around anybody I'd meet. I'd say, hey, I'm supposed to open a retreat for first responders. Kind of like, are you part of it? And then Anthony and I worked together at the San Leandro Police Department. And so for whatever reason, we had kind of just stayed in touch, but very randomly. Like he had a cat that they wanted to get rid of, and so they said, hey, could you use another mouser out on the ranch? And I said, sure, bring them out. And so it was kind of through little just random connections like that where we stayed in touch. And I think we had
Anthony dropped off a cat and then became a co-founder.
Yeah, pretty much. It's pretty close.
He's like, wait a minute, I was just coming out here to
So I think it was like July 4th, we had a barbecue at the ranch here, and we invited him and his family, and he came out, and I took him out to kind of where I had, envisioned the first kind of phase of cabins to go. And I told him, I said, I really want to do this. And I think at the time I wasn't sure. I don't think I knew if he was going through some stuff at work or not. I really just kind of disconnected from San Leandro Police and the people there. And so I told him the vision, and he's looked at me, says, I see it, let's do it. And so I might have the timeline messed up there as far as when exactly that happened, but I don't know if Anthony, were you still working during that time?
No, I was out.
You were out. Okay.
I was out.
Yeah. So, and then, I nicknamed Anthony the Catalyst. And the reason is because once he came on board, like all the doors just started magically opening for us, that in ways that we could have never have imagined. We would say, hey, we need somebody that's really good with nonprofits, and boom, they'd pop up in our lives, and or that happened in so many different scenarios. And so, I really feel like, hey, I needed, in the big picture, I needed to connect with Anthony because he was meant to be part of this. This is our purpose now. It's our passion and our purpose to help other people.
Amazing.
And when I got out of the police work, it was like a very empty void for me. Mentally, I was kind of broken. My back, I had back injury early on in my police career, and I had surgeries and epidurals and you name it. All kinds of medication, and really nothing worked. And so, we just, from there on out, from once you came on board, it was like, okay, this is actually happening now. So it was kind of a neat thing,
Yeah. Well, Anthony, how did you get into law enforcement?
Feel good story there. No. So I started my career with the Los Angeles Police Department in 2012.
Man.
Yeah. So my career from the start was pretty hectic. And I remember one of my first calls for service. I'm a 23-year-old kid. And this all goes down. So, my life experience was, still a kid. So it was hit the ground running. One of my first calls, like I said, was unknown trouble. And Or going there with my FTO, and I don't know anything, right? This is full days out of the academy, and woman comes storming out, elderly lady, and she's just bawling her eyes out. And I'm like, oh boy, like here we go, right? And she says, he's in the room, he's in the room, he's in the room. And me being a kid, I say a kid, I ran into the house, clearing it, looking all, fancy, like you have to be in the movies and all that. And I go in the room, and there is a elderly male, full in his bed, full military outfit on with his head blown off.
Jeez.
He had committed suicide, obviously, and it was one of those situations where it's like, okay, this is real. This is real life, and this is exactly what they tell you in the academy, the things you're going to see, and the calls you're going to have to handle on a daily basis. I was just lucky enough to have that be like my first call there.
Yeah.
And I remember going to my FTO, going like, what do we do? And she's in the living room area, and she's like, what do we got? And she goes in there and sees that, and is like, okay, well, Anthony, you got to handle it. This is how this is. This is not the first time you're going to see something like this, and this is not the last time that this experience is going to happen. So I think in that moment, it really was a pause and complete clarity of how you're going to have to function to do this job. And it really is stomaching it. Because I had an elderly lady coming up to me like, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? And her whole life has changed. And the thing I remember the most is how she was like, all he told me was to walk the dog. And I went and walked the dog, and I came back here, and, this has happened. And no answers, no, nothing. And at that stage in my life, I did not have the answers for her. No, do I have the answers now? But now I have a better idea of the trauma that people experience, whether it's military or first responders, that it's heavy. And I remember just, unfortunately, it was just the facts, right? Can I get your name? Can I get this? Can I get, call a supervisor, all that. And when I look back at that moment, I mean, this is over 10 years ago, and I see it like it was yesterday. And one thing I remember is how her face was just covered in like, tears, and she had boogers, and I'm just, like, what is this happening right now? And stomaching it and moving on and handling that call and going to the next one. And my career has been like that pretty steadily. I, very proactive officer, and, getting guns chases, and I don't want to say getting the bad guy, but it's like, that is why I became a police officer, to help people who couldn't help themselves. And when I was 12 years old, my mom was a victim of a robbery in San Leandro, and that's really what jump-started my career, because my mom, she was, she's a single parent, and she was disabled. And I remember her job was like collecting rent from people, and she would go to the bank and deposit it. And it was very, simple job. She would park in the handicap spot, had very troublesome walking. So I remember one moment, she's like, oh, you want to come with me to the bank, help me out? And, me being a kid, I'm like, I don't want to help you out, and sat in the car. And that's when she was, robbed at knife point, and she came back crying. I'm like, what happened? This has happened. And it was a life-changing moment, obviously, because it's like, how can someone do that to somebody? Parking in a handicap, they're having trouble walking, and they're a prey to people. And there are individuals like that that prey on people who can't really defend themselves. So my entire career, it was like that. It was get the bad guy, get the person who I know is going to try to find a victim, because they're out there, and that's the reality of law enforcement. So
yeah, and I think that's kind of like an interesting point, that folks who don't work in this line of work Brian mentioned it earlier. Like, I had these 2 life-changing incidents that I work, and then the next day I was on vacation with my family. Like, I first call out the gate, it's a guy who completed suicide. I mean, and then you're expected to go home and go to sleep and come back on time and do it again the next day. I mean, that's just kind of this harsh reality of this line of work, whether you're in dispatch or you're out there in the field. I mean, it's a constant, like, go do it again, go do it again, go do it again, because the calls don't stop.
100%. It's, I mean, that's something that the community, they don't see. It's every day it's something. Like, I
Mhm.
can recall times where I've been in multiple suicide calls a day,
Yeah.
and you got to go to lunch right afterwards, right?
Yeah.
And then you're just, talking with your buddy about how the game was last night or what's going on, plans for your days off, when you were just 10 to 15 minutes ago at the worst moment in someone's life.
Mhm.
So in 2020, I was involved in a critical incident where individual tried to kill me with an assault rifle, and it involved, the OIS occurred, and it was a life-changing moment because
Mhm.
it was one of those I can die out here kind of situations. And my whole
Mhm.
career, I internalized everything, and it really kept me safe, you know, understanding, having that, I don't want to say like Superman kind of feeling, but it's like
Mhm.
you can't you can't think of the things you're experiencing on a daily basis, like all of the violence that you see. And because I mean, once you do, it's like, wow, this is pretty traumatic line of work.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So when that incident occurred, it really was an eye opener how fragile life is and how any first responders, put their life on the line on a daily basis.
Mhm.
And after my incident, I'd gone to the therapist, get cleared for duty, and then you're back at work. And you really never fully digest everything that happened to you,
Mhm.
because if you do, that's opening like a whole can of worms, right?
Mhm.
And I'd gone back to work, and I knew I really wasn't the same person that I used to be. I had, slower to go to calls, a little, more agitated, as
Mhm.
in, is this person going to kill me? What's going on? I just had this experience, and
Mhm.
I would be, in the past doing traffic stop, traffic stop, traffic stop, getting pursuits. And it was one of those things where I couldn't anymore. And it's hard for me to voice that opinion. So
Yeah.
I had gone to one of my supervisors, who was a very close friend of mine, and explained to him that, I wasn't I wasn't okay to be there. And I needed to check myself out because I wasn't, good for the community. I
Mhm.
didn't want to be hasty at anything, and I also didn't want to be someone who may have, I guess, not been able to be there for my team if they needed me.
Mhm.
So I didn't want to be the reason that something bad potentially could have happened, because I knew myself, I knew my body, and I wasn't the same person anymore. Death was
Mhm.
very real to me, even though I had already seen how fragile life is during my whole career. It never like affected me. It was
Yeah.
never like a, oh my God kind of moment. And, in my incident, thank God the suspect who was firing at me, um, he had converted his assault rifle into a fully automatic rifle. And when
Mhm.
he pulled the trigger, he had a stove piped and
Oh,
caused malfunction.
wow.
So there was a lot of factors in that. And
Mhm.
said I took myself out. Workers' comp, went through the workers' comp process, and there's was assigned a Kaiser doctor who compared the trauma that I had gone through to like a ankle injury. And I was like,
Right.
I would say, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Ankle injury, all
Um,
right. And
yeah.
it takes time to heal, but nothing really proactive
Yeah.
to what was going on. And when you are off, you're alone, your mind starts like spinning, and
Mhm.
you start remembering every single critical thing that ever happened in your career and the things you put in the vault that you never thought you'd see again and hit you right in the face.
Mhm.
And couple that with, you know, when you're out, I'm sure Brian can attest and many first responders can,
Mhm.
you don't really get the people reaching out to you anymore. There's
Mhm.
a select few. And this goes for people who are retired and all that. And just coupling all the memories that I'd had from my career and the lack of, support, it really put me in a bad place.
Mhm.
So continuing on with that, I had really decided in my career that I was no longer going to do it. I couldn't. My entire, law enforcement time, I would go to these suicides, like I explained to you, and I would never understand why someone would kill themselves.
Mhm.
And when my mind started to put together, oh, okay, I get how someone could kill themselves. It was eye opening, like, okay, I got to do something because I understand that.
Mhm.
So I had gone to retreats. I went to West Coast post trauma retreat, and I really enjoyed the fact that there were other peers and like-minded individuals in first responder community who had gone through traumatic incidents and were able to talk about it.
Mhm.
So hearing their stories and just getting that connection really made me feel like I wasn't alone. I wasn't the poster child for like, oh, bad things can happen to you. And, started to get my confidence and I could see the true power of, you know, what peer support really can do for people
Mhm.
going through it. And during my incident, I mean, you have a lot of other things. It's not the shooting and the OISs that get you, it's like the aftermath of it. And the aftermath
Mhm.
was really daunting. I mean, you know, my department, they really didn't know how to handle what was going on, like, I guess from an emotional level.
Mhm.
And, waiting for, DAs to clear everything and,
Mhm.
do their own investigations. And it takes a toll on the mind.
Yeah.
So if it wasn't for individuals that I could reach out to when I was the lowest I could be and, thinking about, having those suicidal ideations that you can have
Mhm.
from not having a purpose or feeling like, oh man, I'm not a police officer anymore. Where's my identity at? And it was a very bad time for me and my family. And it was when I met Brian and was hanging out at the property where I was like, okay, I understand it. You need to disconnect. You need to be with individuals because he shared his story with me and get those like-minded people together, coupled with, the nature aspect, learn some, education on what's going on with you by someone who's been there, coupled with regulation techniques that
Mhm.
can calm you down. I mean, it was almost a no-brainer that there needs to be more places for first responders where they can have that third place. It's aside from work and home. It's that place where you feel safe and secure. You're with like-minded individuals where you can talk about certain things that may be going on with you
Mhm.
in order to, get that out. Any kind of shameful feelings you have about the job and, let that be out in the public. So you create your own community. So when something hits the fan, like with me, when I was very in a bad spot, I had the ability to contact someone I'd met through peer connections,
Mhm.
and they brought me back from, the the lowest I could ever be.
Mhm.
And they called someone, and they called another person, and called another person, and drugged me out to lunch. And it was that sense of love and care
Mhm.
that was like, more people need this because if I didn't have the support of my wife, my kids, guys like Brian, other peer support individuals I had met during my time of talking with people, And it's not just police officers, it's firemen who connect with me, dispatchers, border patrol guy got a hold of me. I'd probably be dead.
Mm.
So more of these places need to be established, and Brian had, he has the same mindset and had the property. So we're like, let's create this place then, a place for first responders of all kind to be safe and be able to, be themselves, and a preventative measure. Because if I had something like this where people understood what I was going through, I'd probably still be working, and I'm sure Brian as well, and countless others. And it's not the fault for the departments, because it's a two-way street. I
Mm.
never knew I could communicate how I was feeling to
Mhm.
these organizations and to my buddies, right, that I'd worked with, because I was very stuck in that victim mentality. Like, why aren't they calling me? Why aren't they
Mhm.
reaching out to me? And it takes two. They don't know what I'm going through.
Yeah.
They don't have a mind, reading their right.
Right.
So hopefully places like Runestone Ranch that we're creating can maybe shift that culture where it's okay for, if you're going through something, to voice that to someone else who is going through our program, or voice that to a command staff, a city council, because I can guarantee you no one knew how I felt when I was going through it.
And I think it's important for folks listening to understand, like, and I think probably for both of you folks, it was a reality that you did this thing for so long. You went up, you went on patrol, you went out there, you made the stops, XYZ, and then one day you couldn't, and like it doesn't have to be a big incident that causes that wall to slam up. It could be something so simple, something you never thought would be the thing that makes you feel differently about what you're doing, whether it's a 911 call you take or a stop you go out on, or, something you see. It can literally be anything. And being in places, having community, having options, I think as a whole, first responders, like we're responsive, right? Like something has to happen in order for us to come out. And I think that's something people don't understand very often, other than proactivity, right? Like if you call us because you think something's going to happen, like it's not Minority Report. We can't just go talk to someone without cause, without reason, without like a crime or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I think for our mental health for a long time, we haven't been proactive. We've been responsive, right? Like thing happens, we go out, we get help, rather than like let's build the community before, right? Let's do the work before, because something will happen, right? The exposure that we have to things is just so great that it's not if, it's when. So why aren't we creating places like Runestone Ranch where we can go before it gets too heavy, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that is, you said it perfectly. It's a preventative place.
Mhm.
And it's not if you're going to experience trauma, it's like when, and some people are lucky to have it first call, right? And yeah, it's a when this is going to happen. And you need to have that community and see different perspectives. Because as a police officer, I didn't know, what a dispatcher is going through. When, I've talked to multiple people in peer support meetings and all that. And, you know, everyone has a different view of what they have. And I think my trauma, like, oh, I saw this and this affected me, but who's to say the dispatcher who handled the call isn't experienced their own trauma? Who's asking them? Or who's asking the firemen? They didn't do anything, so they didn't experience trauma. Like I can't judge somebody else based on what they're thinking, right? So it's interesting to see different perspectives as we've been doing this with other first responders, that everyone has their story, everyone has something, and to be more curious than judgmental on individuals, because it's a rough occupation to be a first responder,
Heck
and
yeah.
more people need to understand this preventative stuff, so that
Mhm.
way, they can be better husbands, wives, brothers, sisters, all that. Because I'm a way better husband, brother, and son now than I ever was, and it's because I was stuck.
Mm.
And these places that we're trying to do with Brian, all of us, it will unstuck you and let you see, some emotional intelligence increase and how to be self-aware of yourself. And when your cup's full, it's full.
Yeah. Heck yeah. And what does a retreat at the ranch look like for folks who come out and want to partake in what you guys are doing over there? What would that look like for someone coming out to the ranch?
So our retreat, it's a program that's based on the wellness triangle, which is to have a strong mind, strong body, and your finances in order to have a really strong spirit as an individual. Our whole organization, I believe, and Brian believes in having it being peer driven by those who are first responders who have those like-minded, situations that could have happened to you, and can really facilitate those kind of conversations. And all of our peers that we have that are currently associated with us are going through peer training in order to adequately facilitate conversations. So if you came to our retreat as a first responder, you would be educated on PTSI, burnout, and be educated on several regulation techniques that we would bring, whether it's yoga, sound therapy. We want to incorporate physical fitness to that, so it's hiking on the property, have archery, equine therapy, and a lot of group facilitated activities to create a strong bond within those individuals who are coming to our organization, so that they can have their own community. Because during all this, we will, disclose a lot of things that you may be going through, or something that's keeping you stuck, because, you're going to be with these people all week doing these, team building exercises, and you're going to build a lot of camaraderie with one another. And our goal is, by the conclusion of the retreat, that if, something hits the fan with you, or you're part of a call or something that is really affecting you, that you can reach out to somebody and be like, hey, this call affected me. Hear me out, because you will have someone to talk to about that incident. And the hardest thing to do when I was going through it, it's picking up that phone and calling someone that you need help. And hopefully this will make that phone a lot less lighter. And you'll learn some regulation techniques like breathing exercises and, whatever that you may have liked that you experienced at the retreat that worked for you. And, continue that behavior, and be positive, and understand that, you are a hero for doing what you do. This is a selfless profession, and we're just here to offer you some help and education, and just some techniques that work for me, work for Brian, that can maybe save your life down the line when you need it the most.
And let them know that they're not alone.
Yeah.
That's kind of, we've had two open houses, and which both of them have kind of morphed into a retreat on its own. And that's kind of been the message, was like, we've had grown macho men in our arms just bawling their eyes out saying, oh, thank you, I thought I was alone, and that's huge, when you're going through something like that and you do feel all alone, you feel worthless and depressed, and you're looking at your life insurance policy thinking, am I worth more dead than I am alive? So to create this community and this culture up here at the ranch, it's the guys that have retired out, they are going to get that brotherhood and sisterhood back that they thought they had at the department, so.
Yeah. What I love about what you guys are doing is not only during that time, the vision being that time at the retreat, that you're giving folks, tools that they can put in their tool belt, use in their personal lives. But they're also going to bring these tools back to their homes, to their centers, to their departments, if they're still actively, so it's good. The effect is going to bleed out, it's
Yeah.
going to reach more people than just the folks who do attend in person, but as well as you guys are creating that spider web of the community for the folks who do attend. Like you said, picking up the phone is going to be easier. You're going to have someone to call after leaving the ranch for that experience. And then they're going to pass that number to someone else and someone else. And again, it's just going to continue to grow and impact people. And ultimately, for folks, especially who are still actively, working, it's only going to impact the community that they serve in a better way. It's going to make them better officers, better dispatchers, so on
Yep.
and so forth.
Yeah. I mean, if something that we had, I would be 10 times the police officer I ever was. Because it really opens you up to understand people and have real like empathy of what someone's going through.
Yeah.
And we always say you're okay, right? I'm okay, but and sometimes we're not. And our whole emphasis is that you have people who care about you, and our whole job here and our purpose is to exactly what you said, spider web it as far as we can. So we have someone for everybody. If you need someone to talk to, and 90% of peer support is just being present and just being there. Because when I needed it the most and someone was just there, it meant the world to me. And there's nothing more fulfilling than seeing the faces, like Brian was saying, when we have these open houses and they leave like with their faces smiling. And these are people who've never met each other before, ever. But they have that trauma bond with one another, and they too find their own purpose when they leave. And we've seen that with everyone who's come through, that now they see something that they can contribute. And when they have that ability, they like automatically liberate someone else to do it too. So it's really, beautiful to watch. And, we're just starting here. So I'm very excited to see where it goes, because it's needed.
Yeah, you guys are, like, for folks listening, brand new, like just getting it up and running. And with that being said, how do folks, check in with you guys here when you're having events and, when you're getting up and going? How do folks learn more outside of this podcast about what you guys got going on?
We have a website, runestoneranch.org. It's all common spelling. Friday, we just kind of silently launched a cabin campaign on there. And the idea is we want to build out 12 cabins. We have one on the property that's kind of our flagship now, just to show visitors when they come out and check out the organization, what we're doing. The cabin campaign, we are going to contact different agencies throughout the Bay Area here and see if they want to sponsor a cabin. And with that sponsorship, they get to name the cabin after their department or a fallen member of their department or something along those lines. And so we, without trying, we've already kind of secured 2 of them. So
amazing.
I think it's going to actually happen pretty quick. We got a lot of people interested in it. So, but the biggest thing we've been waiting on was the nonprofit. We had to have that IRS letterhead saying that, we were official with the state before we could open a bank account or anything else. So we're finally all caught up with that, and we're ready to launch our first kind of fundraising event for the cabins. So
awesome. Very cool. We're going to include all that information in the description of this episode. And I'm sure we're going to post more about it on our Instagram as well. And as we wrap it up, the question that I ask everyone who comes onto the show is, what advice would you give someone considering a career in public safety? Doesn't matter who wants to go first.
Go ahead, Andy.
Okay. I think you already hit it on the head. It's not if, it's when it happens. And when it happens, have a support system there for you. Either it's your brother or sister you're working with, or if it's a really strong family member, just have a place when it happens, because it will eventually. And you don't want to be caught blindsided when it does.
No.
I
Amazing.
think for me, most first responders have a spouse or partner of some form. My suggestion would be to have a very open conversation with your spouse and partner, and so you have that support system at home. Because if the main person in your life doesn't understand what you're going through, they're not going to be able to help you, and you're going to leave them excluded from a big portion of your life and your emotional being, and where they have every right to be. You don't have to give them all the details, but just have them be an extra set of eyes on you for if you start getting off base of what your baseline personality is, that they recognize it and kind of stop it in the tracks, or and look into it a little closer. So
Amazing. Well, thank you both so much for being willing to jump on and talk about this awesome organization and space you guys are creating. I'm looking forward to hearing more and hopefully coming out and visit. You guys are pretty local, so
yeah,
I definitely can't wait to share this with everybody and get more folks the help they certainly need.
Yeah. And can I add something really quickly?
Please.
So if you do go on our website, there is a peer section. While we're building out our retreat, there is a peer support section where you can click on there, email Danny McAtee.
Mm,
He is
okay.
a San Francisco paramedic, retired, and he facilitates these meetings, which are 100% confidential.
Very cool.
And I've attended them, and they're really good. And it's a way to decompress certain calls. And like I said, it's confidential, and they're free for anybody who wants to join. So it's every Thursday at 10 via Zoom. So
Awesome. That's amazing. We are creating a resources web tab on our site too, so we'll make sure to throw that information on there as well to get people into that resource.
perfect.
thank you, Ashley.
Awesome. Thank you guys again so much. I'm going to respectfully kick you out and be right back with you.
Perfect.
Sounds good. It's our pleasure.
All right, everybody. Another amazing episode here on Let's Talk Dispatch podcast. As Brian and Anthony stated, we need more resources. We need more services like this, like Runestone Ranch, to help our first responders deal with the things that they see, hear, smell, all the stuff. It's so important that you are actively and intentionally paying attention to your mental health. And that looks different for everybody. So definitely check them out. I will include all the information for the resources in this episode description. And like I mentioned, we are pulling together all the episodes and all the folks that we've had on and trying to create a hub on the Raspy Dispatcher for people to access all these great resources that we've had the privilege and honor to chat with. Again, Brian Anthony, thank you so much for your service and for what you're doing after. It's only going to impact law enforcement and first responders in such a positive way. Until next time, everybody, stay raspy. Thank you for listening to Let's Talk Dispatch podcast. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you're interested in becoming a guest on the show, or maybe even submitting your own story, you can do all that and more at theraspydispatcher.com. Until next time, stay raspy.